Thanks, Barry. Barry's going to bear with me. I'm not going to. We're going to do a fireside chat in just a moment, but I think it's worthwhile to just do a couple of slides. I'll flick through them because some people may not be familiar with Ryanair and the journey that we're on. Hey, that's okay. I'm finished. Okay. So may not be familiar, but they may not be familiar about. We've got a journey to go on. We've got about 600 aircraft at the moment, and we're going to take delivery of another 300 aircraft when Boeing get their act together over the next 10 years. But we're not going to be able to do that unless we're able to scale. And the phrase that I use all the time is scale through technology. And we've been partnering with AWS on a lot of these particularly over the last year and a half. And I'm really excited about it. And it's great to see small companies down here. So anyone who's got any bright ideas, just come give them to us for free, and then we'll give them to everyone. You can sell them afterwards at some stage. Okay, so who we are, you all know who we are. But I think it is interesting to show this because the challenges that we have are the yellow boxes are where airplanes take off and come back every day, and the green ones are where we don't yet have aircraft. But that's where we have people, and we've got to communicate with all those people. And you will see, and in a regulatory environment, that's so important. So things like the Ryanair Connect app that we're running with AWS is something that I'll come back to. But just on the scale of things, 3,600 flights will take off today from those 94 locations, and we want to ensure that they're done exactly in the same procedures that they're done in all of those locations, and that will enable us to grow. Just give you a sense of how big we are. You know, we're growing huge market share there in lots of these countries where we're number one. And where we are number two, we will be number one. We'll be number one in the UK next year. And places like Germany and France have structural problems with, the Germans and the French don't like competition despite what they say, and will do anything to stop us growing in those markets. But we'll circle around and we'll come back eventually. So for those of you, so we do 183 million passengers this year. We're going to 300 million. And a lot of people don't get the sense of, because we're spread so thinly across Europe, if you look at that in perspective there, like BA's worldwide traffic is 37 million. Aer Lingus will do 13 million. We'll do 13 million passengers in the next 19 days, okay? So we're going to grow to 300 million passengers. We've got the key issues for us are, do we have the capital to buy the aircraft? Can we hire the pilots and cabin crew? Do we have the maintenance facilities, etc.? And how are we going to scale that through technology? Because we've got to keep the secret sauce that we have, because we've been able to eke out comparative advantage in our business in a regulated environment. And it took us over 30 years to become, as I would say, an overnight success. And we've got to keep that for the next 300 aircraft. So what makes us different? Our costs and our culture. So I've got to keep those two things, and then I've got to use technology. And one of the things that we've invested in hugely over the last 10 years is John Hurley, who you'll be hearing from today as our Chief Technology Officer. He came on board just over 10 years ago, and we have close to 1,000 people on the IT side and application side, because all the ideas that are now coming through, like, we wouldn't be able to implement them if we didn't have the people in place. You can't just go out and buy that off the shelf. So that was a really good decision we made 10 years ago. And this slide here, it's full of numbers. It's the only one really with numbers. But we went public in 1997, and that's the same slide that we use on our cost base. And what it says is that the only cost that isn't there is fuel. So everything else in our business is staff, airports, route charges, the cost and maintenance of the aircraft, sales and marketing. And that is, so we spend 33 euros before we put fuel in the aircraft per passenger. And the reason our costs are so low are, well, apart from the fact that we're brilliant and Michael O'Leary invented the whole thing, but apart from all that, is that we've got larger airplanes and we use them more frequently, okay? So people work harder and we optimize the aircraft. And that's why our staff and efficiency is down at 8, and EasyJet's at 13 per passenger. It's not because we pay our people half the money. It means that what we do is that we have a much larger proportion of people of our total staff who fly and maintain aircraft than our competitors, and they fly more, okay? And so that's just on the staff side. And we, on the ownership and maintenance, that's doing a deal with Boeing, and how we maintain aircraft, but they are larger aircraft. And that gap is going to widen because we're buying bigger aircraft and we're going to optimize them more. And we're going to do that through technology, but we're not going to lose the secret sauce of what we do in the real world of flying aircraft. So that's the chart that everybody looks at every single day. And if you look at that in perspective, EasyJet spend almost 80 euros per passenger before they put fuel in the aircraft. Our average fare last year was 44 euros. That gives you an idea of how. Now, there was another 23 euros on ancillary revenue as well, but our total revenue is less than their cost before they put fuel in the aircraft. Can you imagine what that does to your competitive presence and how you can leverage your fares? So our culture, all this stuff, but like the one that I pick out in the middle is, and I'm just conscious to sit down with Barry, is that we execute the mundane, right? Every single day, 3,600 flights. We're not looking for cost initiatives that are, some manager's idea. Unless it affects broadly every seat, every flight, every day, we're not doing it. So we spend most of our time deciding not to do things rather than to do things and throwing out perfectly good ideas because we don't have the time to do it, or we don't have the people, or it doesn't make sense on first pass, and we'll come back around to it. And you can do that if you've got a widening cost gap. They should teach this stuff in university. Apart from AI, they should teach cost control because it is something that is, that really gives you that advantage against your competitors. And if you can do it in a regulated industry where you have to have 2 pilots and 4 cabin crew in every flight, we don't have any choice in that. Our competitors can only fly 900 hours a year. We can only fly 900 hours a year, and we're able to eke out that cost advantage. So where we're going to continue to grow. And there are a set of circumstances coming out of COVID that are going to make it much easier for us to do that. We will, there's blockages in the amount of aircraft that are coming from the OEMs. You can't start a new airline at this point in time, no matter how much money you have. Airbus are full until after 2030. Boeing are full until 2031. So we've got this, and we've got 300 aircraft coming in that period, and most of our competitors haven't recovered post-COVID. So this just tells you, this graph, the yellow ones are the new aircraft that are coming, and they've got bigger seats, or they've got more, no, not bigger seats, sorry. They've got more seats. They've got, Freudian slip, don't record that, right, okay? So the yellow ones are larger aircraft, so they're the new MAX 10s that are coming. They'll have 220 seats. The grey ones that are going out of service have 189 seats. And the 210 are the MAX 8s that have 210 seats. So broadly, that other graph should be transformed on a per passenger basis. Why? Because you're spreading the same cost over more passengers. And that's where we're going, and we've got the financial backing to do it. This also tells you, this is just, there's about just over 1 billion seats in the European short-haul market, and it's only about 80% recovered. That's why airfares are rising across Europe at the moment. So is there plenty of room for us to expand? Yes, there is. So you can see there, blue is where it was growing in line with GDP. This is total seats in the market. It fell off a cliff during COVID, gradually recovers. But if you factor in airline capacity as a function of a growing GDP, there's still another 20% to grow. So we've plenty of places to put aircraft. So this is the AWS slide, right? Or the slide that what we're doing at the moment. These are the main areas of the business that report into me, and the really clever and cool things that we're doing at the moment that enable us not to hire more people to support the business, that give a much better service to our employees in those 94 locations, and also for our customers as well, and things like Day of Travel app. So on the commercial side, we have embedded dynamic pricing so that we can actually maximize our revenues, not just on the scheduled revenue or fare side, but also on the ancillary revenue side. We have built huge optimization models on how we utilize aircraft. When you've got 600 aircraft and we develop software inside that runs in the background, and we've used AWS computing power to do that. You have a Gantt chart and you've got slots. You can't move everything around, exactly as you would want it. We were able to create free extra aircraft that we previously didn't have last year, just by reorganizing the lines of flying, things that the human eye can't actually see because the screens in our ops center, we just had to keep adding them on for people to be able to see 600 aircraft at the same time. Humans can't do it. Now we're going to start optimizing the schedule. We haven't yet done that in terms of profitability, time of day, et cetera, et cetera. We're only halfway there on the fares, never mind where we actually put the aircraft. So it's all about keeping costs down. On the operations side, it's all about resilience. Ryanair has been hugely resilient, and I'm going to touch wood here coming into the summer. We are probably the best prepared of any airline, right, okay, in terms of if you have to have the aircraft, you have to have the people, the pilots and cabin crew, and you've got to hire those people about 18 months out. And we put a huge amount into resilience. John's team came up with various models. They're all, as a typical Irish company, are all named after drinks or after things that you add into drinks. So we have a system called Diet Soda that on a meltdown day of, say, a French ATC strike, when everybody's out of position, everybody's trying to ring the ops center. I can't have a call center. It's not humanly possible to do that, to actually do it. So we developed these systems that simulate the whole rostering day in real time, so it actually picks and predicts the right people for the next day and messages those people so we have some chance of recovering. So when Nats fell off a cliff, the national air transport system in the UK sat down on the 28th of August last year, we were the first and best recovered airline, because when it all melts, you've got to get the aircraft back to base, get the people back to base, and if those people are out of base and are due to on your flight the next morning, they're not going to be there, so you've got to find somebody else, and you can't humanly do that without these predictive models, and that's what we're doing at the moment. Swaptimizer, right? We've got a model that actually does a sort of an analysis of how to swap aircraft around. So those aircraft, as they move around and go to different bases, it's like critical path analysis. And you've got to get that done because the people in the ops center haven't got the time for positioning aircraft, and we've got these predictive models that work it out. We're only on the cusp of doing predictive maintenance, where you'll actually take components that are about to expire and actually take them out and replace them so that we don't have EU 261 costs on that sales and marketing one of £4 per passenger that we have there. We've got to drive that down. We've loads of fuel initiatives. It's not fuel about like taking less fuel. It's planning how you do that and how you can do that so much better. All the tables that were done on fuel were done by Boeing on a blue sky day about 40 years ago, and nobody's ever looked at them since. So there's simple things that when you land an aircraft, you taxi in on one engine rather than two engines. You don't need two engines on the ground. As a matter of fact, you don't need them in the air, but we're not going to try that just yet. Okay. And then we're going to try and reinvent airports, right? So you look at airports. Airports, what is an airport? An airport is a runway and a fence around, a perimeter fence around it. And an airport gets in the middle of that to get bags and people through. That's it. And we've got to try and find ways to do that, because guess what? After COVID, nobody wants to go to an airport. Nobody wants to go through security. Nobody wants to get on an airplane. They just want to get off the other bloody side and spend their money and do whatever they do. And we've got to make things like that happen. And we're doing it through kiosk technology that's done through our app at the moment. Anyone who's been through Dublin Airport can see we use about 20% of the floor plan of Dublin Airport to push through about 60–70% of the passengers through there, and people love it because there's no more queues. What do I do with HR and people? We got to communicate with those people just on a regulatory way, but also we've got a social media way of doing that as well. Work Vivo is a system that we brought in, and we got this completely open social network within Ryanair. And we haven't had to reprimand anyone. And the legal people eventually got used to it, but most people are sensible and want information. But we have the Ryanair Connect app, which is powered by AWS, which now does rosters, pay. It does lots of things in terms of a regulatory environment, planning. It tells you about your performance, whether the amount of flights that you did from the cabin crew side, what they sold. Now we haven't even begun to use that information to actually process that behind the scenes so that we don't have to hire more people as we scale up over the next 10 years. And that has been hugely, and when that was brought to me, I did it in a typical Ryanair way, was we're not buying it, right? We're not doing it. But we'll do it if you can find a way of saving money in the first week. So we brought in a thing called voluntary time off. And voluntary time off is that we've got too many standbys sometimes on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So people are sitting at home. And what's happened is that we put a certain bank of those days out there. People click a button, it goes straight through to payroll. They're deducted for that. They get a day off, and it's added onto their time. We've actually halved our absenteeism rate with our cabin crew, because those people may have been going to something, and now they're going to go sick anyway, right? So now they don't go sick. Right, sorry, you know what I'm saying, right? Okay, we have sick people too, right? Okay, they're generally competitors, right? But there are people who will decide to do something, real human behavior. We've paid for the app 10 times over already, and we only introduced it last November. Like, we saved millions on that, and people have been able to take time off. So that's just a Ryanair mindset. And now we're doing all the other stuff on top of that. Labs and digital. We have close to 1,000 people in Dublin, Wrocław, Lisbon, and Madrid. Everything from data scientists, to people who design apps, etc., and are doing all these optimization models, how we're doing resilience with operations, etc. And broadly speaking, of all the people in IT, 20% of them are doing cybersecurity, 50% of the remainder are trying to extract more money from you in terms of fares, bags, and seats, and the other 50% of that 80% are working on things like Ryanair Connect, like customer service, etc., and ways to stop us hiring more people and delivering a better service to our people. And then finally, on customer service, we've got AWS or Amazon Connect. I can never remember what it is. But anyway, that's going to be a bot that we will have transformed, I'd say, customer service by the end of this year, and how we handle that, how we identify you by the mobile phone that you come through on, and how we deal with a pre or post booking, etc. And we are just gradually going through that, and that will be transformed, just like we solved refunds during COVID out of necessity, because we had to give everybody their money back, and we had to do it in an ordered way. We didn't know whether we were giving money to third parties, whether they were going to give it back to the passengers, etc. But we had to come up with ways, and then we realized, geez, we can actually communicate with millions of people with a financially robust system on cash going out the door. Can you imagine if we could transform that into real customer service, talking to people about how they can do things with their bookings, etc.? And that's where that journey came from. So what are the risks? Boeing delays, poor ATC performance, volcanoes, everything, geopolitics, but we just have to deal with them as they come. Risks that we can manage, believe in our own bullshit, safety and cyber, management span of control. This is the critical thing for us. We are not going to be able to grow with another 300 aircraft and add them onto that network unless I can do it through technology. And then we've got the ability to support those systems at succession. Barry, I think now we're just there, right? Yeah. So, yeah, we've done all that. Right. Great. Thanks. You on time?
Yeah, doing great. The volcanoes thing sounds like there's a story behind that. Maybe we can talk about that over a beer. Really interested in this sort of emphasis on technology. And I know I've known the company for many years. I'm not sure that there was always that emphasis on technology. What's the history of how Ryanair's got into being technology driven?
Sometimes you make your own luck as well. I think we were very fortunate at the time with all the hard work that was going on and bringing Ryanair from bankruptcy. Michael would have been hugely, against sort of technological solutions at that stage, because it reeked of, spending money for a start and things like that. But we would have had, run the payroll, and that was about it, right, in terms of, we had a Lufthansa system that managed the aircraft. But I think the big thing came for us with the internet, in access to the internet in 1999. And, I was instrumental in that, even though I was in a HR background at that stage, where we got a 15-year-old kid to design the front end of the website. And we plugged it onto a new system, and that a new background booking system. And that enabled us to say, we could now distribute our product. Before that, you needed these old, credit card machines to issue tickets, and we would have never been able to grow or leverage the cost model that we have. So we're quite fortunate. So it started then. And then I think when we got into growing the last phase of growth, and that's when John, which is here, will be talking later on, took over as CTO, and really we brought people in. And then we had a sort of a period now where we know what we want to do. And I think one of the things we get from AWS is that they see how quickly we react to it because we've got the people to do it. So we know what we want to do, and it's all about technology now. Once we can stick to the knitting of the cost on the real world of pilots, cabin crew, engineers, maintenance, buying aircraft, etc., that's going to enable us to go. So that's changed.
Yeah. That's fascinating. A 15-year-old, that sounds like someone still in high school.
Yeah, it was in my previous job in Gateway. There was a young kid in on work experience. And when I was in Ryanair then, and I think, all the accountancy firms were in talking about, we can do the website for you, it's going to cost you 300,000, whatever it was. And then I was sitting in the room going, geez, what, I don't think anyone knows what they're talking about here. I said to Michael after me, I got this kid, I think, who developed an intranet when I was in Gateway, and he might be able to do it. So we bought him a Renault Megane, and he's running a great company. John Beckett, he runs a great company called Adrenaline, .ie to this day, and really clever kid. And the database was internet enabled, but he put the front end onto it, and we did it for 10 grand instead of 300 grand. Renault Meganes have gone up since then.
Fantastic story. It's a fantastic story. So I'm amazed, first of all, that you're saying 60 or 70% of the traffic in Dublin Airport is Ryanair traffic.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And 20% of the floor area, and you said that's because of the technology that you're using.
Yeah, well, we like everybody uses a terminal. So what we wanted was, what we always, you have these, you wouldn't believe it, that most technology systems in airports and that service aviation are 70s and 80s technology. They don't use the cloud. They have to drill, take up expensive marble to run cables along. And then there's a cost per passenger, which is what we don't want. We want a fixed cost. So we have essentially a dumb weighing machine, right? The ones in Dublin still have a screen, but the ones that we're putting in other airports have no screens. They're just a weighing machine, and you use your app to scan it in. It checks the weight, and don't worry, it checks the weight when you get to the desk as well, so you don't put extra stuff in afterwards. And then it doesn't need any human interaction, and off it goes. And we're not beholden to the people who own the technology, because we own the technology. They own the weighing machines.
Yeah, wow. Impressive.
And that's all done through the cloud.
Yeah, super impressive. So, what about data? I mean, a lot of this, you're talking about these systems that are predictive and you're modeling things and so forth. What's your approach to gathering that data, capturing that data? And
I suppose we didn't know how to use it in some way, but we have a history of that. We have what's called an operational flight data monitoring system, which is essentially a black box that goes into the back of the aircraft. And we introduced that back in, I think, 2001, 2002. And it measures loads of different sensors and points, a couple of thousand of those. And it dialed up on a phone, on a mobile phone at the end of the night to a central computer. And it meant then that our safety people were able to look at exceedances. So that meant that no other airline in the world has 96 places that airplanes take off every day, because the oversight for that, from a safety point of view, it starts to move against you, especially if you hire people from other airlines, and then you put them together with new people, and then they start doing things that they learned in the other airline rather than doing what is laid down in Ryanair in standard operating procedures. And the standard operating procedures in Ryanair for flying an aircraft that's it. You can't go outside of that. That's the way we do it. So we were able to see exceedances. That meant we were able to manage risk, but not in any sort of automated way. But we're now going to be able to plug that more in, because we've got that data going back over 20 years. We've got the data going back over 20 years for the VPOS devices. We haven't done much with that. So in theory, we know where everybody bought a panini from what seat at what time, So I'm sure we're going to be able to use that as well. But, I'm less excited about that, but I'm in terms of on the sales side, because, it's not a business you can grow in the way you can grow other retail. But I am from the safety side, because once you start expanding beyond that, you need to know what's going on every day, every minute, so that people are not exceeding it. The Ryanair model is built on that 2 pilots might arrive from 2 separate bases, doesn't happen very often, and they get in and they know exactly how to run the aircraft, rather than all of you out here who've got, the complication. If you've got offices in different countries, when you arrive there, they all run it in a different way. You imagine what in an airline, it's got to be exactly the same, and data allows you to do that.
Yeah, interesting. But I know you're saying it's not the most important thing, but it sounds like you're saying you've got records of every ticket bought over the last 20 years, who it was bought by, where it was bought for the price, and all the rest of it. Surely that gives you enormous opportunity for price optimization and dynamic pricing.
It does, but don't forget the schedule moves as well. And because you're always in a growing environment, you never have the optimum schedule. You can have the optimum schedule in terms of aircraft utilization, which is what I spoke about earlier, where you can essentially create free aircraft. But you've got to send them to the right places, right? With where there are going to be passengers. But I think the next phase will be inserting through that data on the schedule side as to where we fly and why and frequencies. Right. Because you add on capacity. Like if I'm flying 3 times a week to Verona from Dublin, and I think we've gone to 4 times, like you end up just thrashing your fares on that until you can build it up again.
Yeah.
And I think for us to learn about that, and we have the data there to do it.
Yeah. So it would be remiss for us not to talk about the topic of Gen AI.
Yeah.
Is that something which is a sort of a near-term investment for you?
Yeah.
Is it something?
And I think we are, to simplify it, there's one way of flying an airplane, there's one way of fixing an airplane that is set down by the regulatory authorities. And obviously that is in a manual somewhere. And it has, so our ability to put all of those manuals and all of the things that happen, particularly on the safety side, into a big model whereby people then can query on that, has got to be better for training, has got to, it'll probably reduce training footprints, etc., because it isn't open to interpretation. It's what you have to do. And it's in a big, long, a book that goes through. So I see that on that side. I see the Gen AI coming on from the extra development on the customer service bots. I see things like, we do some element of surge pricing. We call it the Pescara pigeon fanciers syndrome, whereby there might be a surge on flying to one location that isn't enough to move the needle.
Yeah.
But if you're watching for the sensitivity, you can adjust fares if everyone's going to the same wedding somewhere or something like that, and the prices go up, So we're really on that at the moment, but there's so much more to go.
Yeah, just
You'll all be delighted to know. Which is going to reflect itself in lower fares.
I mean, if you think about your industry, do you see Gen AI having a huge effect, or is it sort of something which is a few years out?
I think it's going to be on the customer-facing side and on the employee-facing side. It's less to do with sort of flight operations. I think it'll be huge on predictive maintenance. An engineer's instinct is always not to replace a part until it's broken. And the idea that you take out a perfectly serviceable part and replace it when it's not broken will take a mind shift amongst that, and having but I think if we're able to do that and predict component failure, that is just going to do so much more for on-time performance and not paying out money on EU 261. So I see Gen AI coming into that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, then there's the obvious ones in, as I say, in customer service with the bots and that, but that's coming on hugely, given that most of the answers, it'll be 25 different ways to say, no, you're not getting your money back. You're a non-refund airline.
You know, non-refund airline, yeah, exactly. Well, you know, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. I'm super impressed with what you've been doing, and obviously excited that you're working with AWS on your projects.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.